Hello, welcome to our second panel discussion for today. This one is looking at how you can effectively integrate radio in your multi-channel strategy campaigns. I've got three panelists today. First is Harry Lang, he's the CMO at Stint. There's Amir Ali, who's Innovation Strategy Manager at Mitchells and Butlers. To our second, and Rebecca Frank, who's a Content Director at KISS. Rebecca, I'm going to kick off with you, if that's okay. I'm guessing you're going to be pretty much a big flag waver for radio, aren't you? And that it's still a powerful medium and one that we should be using as a vital platform for content and for campaigns.
I think you've said it all. Completely agree. Next question. Yeah, 100%. A huge advocate, and I've been in radio for a long time, so I've seen it go through many different guises. And obviously, we are not just an audio medium anymore. We are a lifestyle brand at KISS, which means we do operate on all platforms. But in terms of the superpowers of radio, which is what I would really like to talk about, that a lot of advertisers and clients have discovered in the pandemic and continued to be, converted spenders with radio. It's the flexibility, it's an agile medium, we can turn things around very quickly. The fact that we're always on, that consistency, that repetition and frequency, as well as being able to disrupt our own sort of schedule for pop-up moments and powerful, impactful one-offs. And the sort of the creativity that we can really bring to campaigns is something that I really like, because everything that we do comes through a human being. Ultimately, it's a very profound thing about the medium and a very kind of different thing to many, many others, that it really is through the voice and connecting with the imagination of the person on the receiving end. So there's a lot of emotional intelligence that goes into sort of the creativity of a radio show and a radio link or a radio campaign. And I think that's just really kept us on our toes during the pandemic. And like I say, we've just had so many sort of new spenders and audiences come to radio over the past sort of 2 years because of that companionship and that warmth that the medium can bring. So anyway, I could do like an entire sort of thesis on how brilliant radio is. So I don't want to bore everybody. So I'll stop there and let you carry on.
I'm just going to sort of add to that. Really, we touched on it. We had a panel earlier this morning where we kind of touched a little bit on demographics. But I wanted to ask about KISS. As a platform, as a brand, if you like, is it easy because you've kind of got this ready-made target audience, haven't you? You've got this demographic there in place, I suppose. Or is that being a little bit too simplistic?
Well, I would say it's too simplistic because I need to keep my job and make it sound really mysterious and high level. But no, I would say actually at KISS we've got a very broad audience in terms of age and demographic, and that's a real challenge actually, because we all need to ban the bland. We all need to get rid of generic sort of approaches and scattergun when it comes to reaching audiences. So what we do with our sort of literally 15 to 40-year-old audience is we utilize different platforms and different zones of the network and different voices in order to hit different people that are all united under a brand, a mindset, a young at heart, good time, energetic, social currency kind of brand, which is what I think the things that really kind of underpin KISS. But we really do have everybody from a sort of an 18-year-old who's incredibly into new music all the way to a 40-year-old who's a real lean back listener who's never heard of TikTok. And we deploy, different tactics on those different platforms. So we've got the most life stages, I would say, brands that are similar to KISS and KISS in radio. So many life stages compared to older demographic radio brands like Magic, for example. It's another Bauer brand where, yes, you still have 20 years on paper in that target audience set, perhaps, but the difference between either end of it is much, much smaller. So yeah, for us, it's just diversifying on platforms. We have 3 radio stations, 4 internet only stations, and 1 million, social platforms as well. So yeah, it's a lot more complicated, but yeah, we do have a sort of strong mindset that everyone's united under.
I mean, just to sort of expand on this a little bit, because it does seem to me that the beauty of radio is that you can effectively reach a large chunk of people at the same time, and that it's easier to get messaging across and targeting and so on. So does it still have that power to provide these kind of water cooler moments? Does it still have that credibility, buzzword of the moment, I suppose, to an extent?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been listening a lot about podcasts and people having their headphones in and kind of, listening to a one-to-one. But radio, I mean, we're lucky the demographic we're trying to reach are people who are driving to work. They listen to commercial radio in their car. They're builders working on roofs for their big sort of thing. And we sell food, and everyone, from our site, one of the biggest problems is everyone wants to eat at the same time. But that's great if you're trying to reach people when they're hungry. Also, we're looking at our figures. Pandemic has completely changed how people eat. So previous to the pandemic, most of our occasions were eating out with family. Now that's kind of completely changed, and most of them are catching up with friends. So it's really important that you can reach different people in different houses, different households, who come up sort of have the same idea and saying, oh, let's get together and meet at, one of our restaurants, one of our pubs. So being able to reach everyone at this virtual water cooler is essential for our recovery, to get people back out as groups, a group of 10 friends. And I've got to say it's predominantly women who are coming back in groups, but it's so important to try and get that. And you can't do that through the other channels. You can't reach everyone at the same time and kind of like get them to think the same thing through the other channels. It's so hard.
Should it then be treated separately as a separate sort of platform from a multi-channel approach, or can it sort of sit within a multi-channel campaign?
I can't really answer that, but what I can tell you is we were early adopters in multi-channel. So I was just looking back. In 2010, we had James Corden, which we could never afford now, did a campaign for Toby Carvery, and he did it was a multi-channel campaign. Back then, we didn't have great traction on social. We didn't really have a lot of Facebook users, but since we had him, I mean, we had 100. That's the first time we reached 100,000 likes on and users on our Facebook page. And it was a poll. And polls are I can't get away from polls on LinkedIn, but it was a poll on which is your favorite Carvery meat, which was spearheaded by him. So that's the other great thing about radio. People in offices, whatever, they're listening to the radio, but they're on their keyboard. So to cognitively, that if you can integrate everything, that's how I'm sorry I'm rambling here, but the other thing we have a problem with is, one, awareness isn't great, but that translating awareness to consideration is one of our biggest challenges. But doing it through multi-channel, we get them on the radio, then they engage with one of our socials. And it translates to them coming. No, I don't think you can do it in isolation, because if you're not integrating and you're diluting your spend. So, like, in a way, one of my biggest struggles is we used to have big spend on radio. Now we don't, because they're spending a lot on social and stuff. But if you don't use something big and broadcast, you lose traction. You don't get that amplification. So I guess the short answer is no, it can't be standalone. It needs to be integrated into everything you're doing.
Great. Okay. Howard, does that sort of ring any bells with you? I mean, I know you've sort of gone from working in-house now to sort of working with agency works and so on. I mean, is this sort of telling with your experience of radio?
No, I probably disagree a tiny bit with Amir, but he's obviously coming from very specifically his point of view with M&B. Historically, I've seen radio fitting in both camps. Some of the beauty of it is the fact that you can get very good value reach, and the fact that you can localize so implicitly. These networks across the UK and internationally, you can target very specific cities with radio, and you can switch it on very quickly as well. So in terms of direct response activity, if I wear my old hats, in the gambling industry, and prior to that with client work, you could turn around a radio campaign in under a week. You'd be live the week later. If you're selling cars, pizzas, house insurance, whatever you want, if you've got a special on to respond to market conditions, you can switch it on incredibly quickly. And I think you can do it as a standalone on the DR side. In the brand side, which possibly is where Amir is coming from, I do think it has a richer purpose integrated with other channels. I think the sum being greater than the parts. Combined with TV, combined with maybe out of home as well. I think radio has a very rich offering to give. And some of these channels, KISS as an example from Rebecca's experiences, very hard to reach demographics. Although I am disappointed to hear that at 44, I'm not allowed to listen to KISS anymore.
You're out, mate. Unless you've got a radar diary, in which case you're very welcome to ticket.
Oh, there we go. But it is. tough to reach demographics, easy to switch on, very much a good value way to build weight behind your brand campaign. So it's kind of got that jack of all trades capability depending on your purpose.
Mm-hmm. Can I say a really quick thing, Matt?
Yeah.
Sorry, super quick, which is just that two things. Like, one is, there's just the very nature that radio can either be a lean in or a lean back media means that you can obviously multitask, which is the beauty of radio. So therefore, it being on social at the same time as being at an event or an activation, as well as being on the radio. Like a lot of I would say the majority of our campaigns, obviously for a brand like Kiss, are multi-platform for that very reason, so that, you know, both through airtime or a sponsorship and promotions activation and through other mediums that they're buying, that audience can second screen, if you like, and can really pick it up. But also, I think kind of what you're alluding to there, Harry, in terms of the standalone piece, like at Bauer, we've got kind of Octave, you know, digital advertising kind of outlet where we can really target, really personalize, and people can, that can be part of a package sort of thing, but some people just really kind of go in on that. So it can be both. But yeah, I just wanted to chip in with that from a Bauer point of view.
Yeah, Harry, go on, please. Yeah.
No, it was me. I was trying.
Sorry, man.
But even if you think it's single, so if we put a lot of spend into, I mean, we do with global, I'm afraid, but you know, like I say, you know, it's all out there. But we own a lot of outdoors because we own a lot of big sites with outdoor posters, which we own ourselves. So if you put your money into radio and you integrate the two, as you're driving past one of our posters, it kind of ends up being multi-channel. Not what you call multi-channel, but it is. You're reaching people in more than one way, and it really amplifies that. That's the beauty of it. And people are in their cars a lot, so I think it's really important. It doesn't have to be multi in terms of you're spending money in lots of different things, but it's just getting that awareness and that repetition and people seeing and hearing you. If people can see and hear you, I mean, we were talking about subways. People are constantly walking past subways, and if they hear a Subways ad as they're walking past it or see one of their A boards, it just kind of like you get that amplification. So that's why it's so important, I think. So I'm saying you can't ignore radio. That's kind of what I'm saying.
I was going to ask Harry, how sort of important is creative in that? But you know, to get that amplification and that cut through, and to get people to see and hear, as Amir was just saying there, does it have to be big budget stuff, or can you sort of do it fairly comfortably?
No, I think you can do it comfortably. It's like with any creative medium. If you've got a strong concept and a strong call to action, and you execute it well, which doesn't mean big budgets. I think good ideas can sing through in a radio medium. And last year, I was talking a lot about earworms, and we're doing it in context of radio as well as TV advertising. But, you know, creating earworms that aural mnemonics that relate to the brand. There's so much scope in that space to give people something that just triggers a positive thought related to your brand. And I think, you know, like with any creative medium, you put the effort into that process, you concentrate on the audience and what's going to engage with them and entertain them, quite frankly, then you can get a win without, you know, hiring George Clooney to do your voiceover. I don't think, you know, there's a lazy way to look at it, which is big budget, celeb voiceovers, etc., etc. And for most of us, we don't want to and can't afford to go down that path. So, you know, the mother of invention is to come up with something which is going to get stand out and choose your radio media breakdown to get the right sort of audience. And for me now, I've got an interesting challenge because I've got two audiences at stints, one of whom is their student audience, 18 to 25-year-olds who want to do stints to work in the hospitality trade. And the other is hospitality general managers and owners who are probably 20 to 60 years old. Now, I can't do that with the same execution. And the student side is probably going to be more prevalent in terms of city targeting. But, you know, you can imagine it's a very different brief to look at when one brand sits over the top of it. I'm quite looking forward to that challenge, in fact. I do think radio is going to have a seat at that table, especially digitally linked to regular radio, because I want to target students when they're at their university towns, which isn't where they are, you know, maybe registered to live. So there's a media purchasing plan and a creative requirement plan and a temporal when do I switch it on and off plan, I think radio is going to be quite a handy media for me when I get down that route.
This is what I'd like to sort of chuck out to everybody, really. But you're talking there about messaging and so on, and I guess this is relevant for all sides of the fence. But are there challenges with things like tone of voice and so on, and the way sort of messaging is sort of brought across, especially as we're sort of cautiously crawling out of hopefully out of the pandemic and so on? Is that still a major challenge?
Do you mean sort of like getting the tone right? Is that an issue?
Basically, yeah.
I'll go first, just from our point of view, sort of programming and campaign point of view. We felt closer than ever to our audience over the past sort of couple of years. So I wouldn't say it's all been rosy. Been obviously huge shifts in audience behaviour and everything during the pandemic, but I think we've had an even more intimate relationship with our audience due to their sort of listening habits, having changed, during perhaps wild generalization, but the sense of companionship being even more valuable than ever that a medium like radio can bring. So we've had a lot of feedback and have allowed our sort of our presenters to bring even more of themselves to the kind of microphone, although we're absolutely in this country not all in the same boat, and I won't subscribe to that motto. I think that there was something that really united the whole country. So, I think there's always a day-to-day for campaigns on the radio and on social media. It has to be a daily check on the nation's mood, judging the sort of temperature, etc., of feelings around Boris Johnson, or, how funny to be with something or not, or whatever. But I don't think it's been any more difficult during the pandemic. If anything, we've been even more in tune with our audience, personally, just from a KISS point of view. But it's always something we have to think about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point I was getting at is radio, in terms of campaigns, able to offer that kind of flexibility in terms of turning messaging around fairly quick, because that is something that we've seen a lot of across various industries, I think, over the past couple of years, this idea of quick reactions and so on. It does seem to me that radio's a great, an ideal platform really for that sort of maneuverability.
Yeah, I mean, from the ridiculous to sort of when there were the big story in the news about a load of students that were suddenly trapped in halls, and we managed to activate with KFC, one of our partners, to send a bunch of university students a load of KFC that afternoon. There's sort of fun things like that, all the way to doing event radio moments when lockdown was first announced, when we knew that a bunch of festivals had been cancelled. But also, like I say, it's still sort of goes on all the time with radio, that we're all waiting for a Sue Gray report, and that's not something we're going to be ignoring on KISS. We're going to have some fun with it, and we're actually trying to get hold of a listener who's called Sue Gray, that's going to deliver her own report on KISS this week. So these are just brilliant fun things that the brilliant team here come up with, that are meant to sort of be escapist and entertain, but also be sensitive and be there for the listeners. So yeah, I mean, obviously I would say this, but I feel like we've got a real superpower in that way.
And do brands sort of buy into that as well? That they sort of come on board with that because that's part of the KISS ethos or philosophy or whatever?
Yeah, I think a phrase that a lot of clients and agencies are using at the moment in conversations is cultural moments and cultural relevancy, and whether that is about being part of a conversation about mental health, if there's a particular temperature check or conversation going on, so whether there's a real planned seasonal approach to that, or whether it is just brands really wanting to be part of a zeitgeist conversation that popped up overnight, whether it is the Brits or whether it is International Women's Day, either end of that spectrum. Cultural moments and agility has been something that has probably been the biggest basis of our conversations with agencies. So a lot of our partnership deals and shapes at present have had a lot of very fixed things, but a lot of kind of flexi-pots and a lot of very flexible bits of inventory that we can really have conversations every week with clients and with agencies to make sure that, what are we doing next week? Let's leave a blank space in that running order with that inventory until we know what everybody really cares about, and then help you to tap into that.
Amir, are you a fan of the new agility?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really important, and also that cliche about radio being your friend. So it's getting that tone of voice right all the time, and then being able to flex, because that mood does change, and things change. Things change very quickly. people want to like you, and it's so important in the whole brand building and becoming familiar. That's one of the most important things our brands, because they are sort of, your demographic is so important. So you kind of need to temperature check what they're feeling, what they're saying, what their conversations are, and it's much easier to do with radio. And there's social radio coming up as well, and it is very important to keep your finger on the pulse with what people are doing.
How does that sort of present opportunities or challenges, or a bit of both?
It's always a bit of both, Matt. It's as marketers, every day is the opportunity day. We look for cracks of chance and chances to spend less money to get more bang for buck. That's all we do, and whether it's brand building or direct response. I think the tone of voice question I was interested by in that. For me, I spend a lot of time doing brand marketing pieces for clients when I have my consultancy, and I'm doing another one now. Tone of voice for your brand should be fairly clearly defined before you even think about channels, before you even think about execution. That's part of the architecture alongside personality, mission, positioning, and that feeds into every brief. And getting the creative and the right channels. I think KISS is an interesting one for me because of that student audience I've got. And actually, I want to not only look at it as a media to carry a radio campaign, it's going to be a learning exercise. I want to learn more about my audience. I want to learn it from a channel expert. I mean, chances are I'll be asking Rebecca to have a chat after this, because the channels are the experts in the spaces where their audience live. And the piece, Rebecca, you said about conversations and then having an opinion, this is it. You have a relationship with your audience. It isn't fire and forget. You have a relationship that they trust in the media that you're carrying. And by advertising on that channel, you're buying in an amount of that trust. But it's going to ring pretty hollow if you don't get your tonality correct for that channel. So there is an interconnected relationship there, and the successful radio ads be the one that are bespoke for the audience on the channel they're existing in. If it's a young audience, it's got to be a bit fun. Is it a bit edgy? Because they'll like that more than they will something that's preachy and old school. So I think there's a creative and tonality challenge, and if your brand doesn't fit in that space, you're probably in the wrong medium. You probably shouldn't be fighting in the youth radio space. So I think all of this is contextually about the fit, and that's part of media planning piece, part creative, and part strategic.
What other expectations does that sort of audience have? I mean, in particular around things like purpose. Are they expecting brands now to have a voice beyond just trying to sell us something?
It's like that hateful word purpose that is floating around marketing like a bad smell. Purpose, I think, inherently is about behaviors. It's about behaviors that we should all be enacting anyway, quite frankly. The moment a brand starts talking about its purpose, it's probably not actually acting on those behaviors. It's hard selling itself as being a good actor in mental health, a good actor in LGBTQ, for example. And actually, I dislike it inherently. I think these behaviors should be inherent and not lent upon as marketing devices. Your brand should live and breathe these behaviors if it believes them to be correct and appealing for its audience. But the purpose question, there was a very good article I read this week, actually. I can't remember exactly who it was by, but it was talking about purpose. And effectively, once you bring that name into a marketing strategy meeting, you're already losing the battle. You're already on the wrong kilter. So I think inherently brands should act well. Good brands should act well. Good brands should have behaviors that their audience will respect and appreciate and be able to engage with. That's all true. But don't put your hat on a peg marked purpose and say, aren't we awesome? Because by definition, you probably aren't.
Rebecca, does that sort of is that something you agree with? Are we hopefully living in a post-purpose age now?
I'm just getting the pom-poms out to cheerlead behind Harry at this point, because actions speak louder than words, like, anyway. All our mums told us that. But I think we know that the under 40 audience, incredibly broad thing to say, but for the purposes of being on a panel, I'll just discuss that, make decisions incredibly quickly in an incredibly cluttered market. So if there is a sniff of inauthenticity, or bandwagoning, or not being able to back something up, it means there's a lot of pressure on brands, but so there should be. And if the battle for attention is higher than ever, for us, it's thumb time, whether that's clicking on an app, whether that's clicking on social media. Really, we're not trying to get 18-year-olds to run out and buy DAB radios. Of course, we'd absolutely love that to be every school leaver's gift. We've got to compete well and be quality and mean it. So yes, that does mean that we need to have talent that means what they say, as well as having very clear cut through campaign moments that help our audience in that sea of choice at a glance, out of the corner of their eye, know what we stand for. And clients that work with us well in this space have exactly that philosophy, that it is not it's not a time to sort of clamour layers of key messages to cling on to the kind of bus on your bike of sort of purpose to that a sort of listener or a celebrity brings to the table. It's absolutely got to sort of walk the walk. And I would say younger audiences are way more switched on to authenticity and people meaning what they say and doing what they say they're going to do than ever. And they hold us to huge account on that. And I celebrate that because it makes us work harder, makes me make sure I need to hire the right people and generally be better. Yeah.
I was going to bring Amir in. We seem to temporarily lost him for a moment. So hopefully he'll be back with us soon. But I guess generally, is this a problem for us that we're going to get so sort of wound up in these messaging and so on that actually we need to get a bit back to basics perhaps, and then just as Harry was sort of alluding to there, just assume or accept that these things are diversity and so on are going to be part of the brand's DNA anyway. Then we can just get on with the business of selling, if you like.
I think that they're part of a good brand's DNA, and I think that Rebecca coined the word there, authenticity. That's what it is, and by definition, that means not selling in your good behaviours and how worthy you are. You live them and exist them, and let your audience discover them. This is the one thing. Via social channels, via your content, they'll discover your good behaviours. They'll see it, and if your intent is correct, then they won't bust you with cynicism because. And let's face it, there's plenty of brands out there that hang their hat on various worthy trees, whether it's environmental or societal or around the mental health question. Some of them are authentic, but there's an awful lot of them where you dig a millimeter under the surface and you go, hang on a sec, you're saying that, but here's some of the other behaviors over here, and it's the opposite. And I believe audiences, when they do inevitably discover these things, they lose trust, the integrity piece goes, the relationship breaks down. Now, these are the key things, these are key hinges on which brand marketing is built. These are the reason people that shop with brands, have ongoing relationships with brands, spend their money with brands, which ultimately is what we're all charged with doing, is getting customers who spend. And if that relationship breaks down, then that's a massive error, because what it should be is a long relationship that is continuously fruitful and built on trust and goodwill, which is hinged in the truth. So I think, a long-term brand goal is to do it correctly. If you have a space in a certain area, formerly known as purpose, great, go and act it, go and do it, let people discover it, and do it forever and ever and ever. And well done. I think you'll succeed with that approach. But you force feed it to people, especially a younger audience who are naturally cynical and investigative anyway. And I think you'll be called out. And there's plenty of examples of the corpses of brands. Brewdog this week, which is a wonderful example of a brand coming unstuck in public, which I'm schadenfreude isn't even the word, but the mirth I'm seeing in that scenario. That's what happens. The trust disappears, and there isn't a relationship. So I think it's very important to take it seriously and enact on your behaviours at a foundational level.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know we sort of lost you for sort of a minute there, but hopefully you sort of caught the gist of what we were talking about there. Does all these sort of issues, does it sort of feed into lot of your messaging and campaigns, and I guess particularly we're talking about radio here as well. But is that on your mind a lot, or do you just sort of, as I say, just sort of stick to the basics a lot of the time?
I disaggregate the two. So there's lots of things we have to do, especially working in food. So there's the carbon stuff we're doing, the looking after our staff, the mental health. There's all these things we're doing. We try and kind of have that elsewhere, because our main purpose is the brand benefit. And like we're talking about KFC being one of your biggest clients, Rebecca, but KFC's purpose is to give people great fried chicken, and that has to be, so your product has to be your purpose. The other things that we do are just hygiene factors, just being, if you imagine a brand as a person, you should be a good person. So they're just things you have to do, and we do them and we have them, and it shouldn't be what you're leading with. I know Nando's are very shouting about their carbon neutral credentials, etc., but that's different. That unless you happen to be Greenpeace, that can't be your main purpose. Your purpose has to be your consumer benefit, because if you're not providing that, if that's not what you are doing, then it doesn't matter what else you do, because people won't buy your product. So it doesn't matter if you go carbon neutral, because someone else will take your customers. So that's the problem. So it's almost like a pyramid. Your main purpose has to be doing right by your customers, giving them what they want to do. And then, we take it, anything we do around the sustainability pieces and stuff, we kind of do it by stealth behind the scenes, and we just work on it, because consumers want it to be easy. They don't want to be preached at about it. They don't want to be told what to do. They just want you to do the work behind the scenes. So primarily, that you've got to give them like Harvest is one of our biggest brands. One of our biggest purposes is you turn up with your kids and they can run around, scream, destroy the place. The thing is, we will feed you and look after your children. That's our purpose. Everything else we do behind the scenes is, just things you have to do. It can't be the primary purpose, and you can't preach about it.
Absolutely. We've still got a few minutes left, so just to say to people, if you want to send any questions in, there is a tab that allows you to do that. We've also had a poll running. Let me just quickly read out a question for this. I think we can show it on screen as well. Do you focus on multi-channel or solo campaigns, or a mix of the two? I don't know if that's coming up on the screen. Yeah, and that's fairly 100% there. Does that sort of surprise anybody, or?
No. In short, I don't think I've ever seen a poll that looks like that, to be honest.
No.
It's quite satisfying, isn't it? I think it would be crazy in 2022 if we weren't all thinking in a multi-channel way, not least because the diversity of media consumption and the fragmentation of media consumption. In radio, we know that commercial radio reaches at record times, but we also know that for younger audience that hours across the industry are going down. The amount of time that people are spending, even with Facebook, is going down because there's just more stuff for everybody to spend time with. So that's the kind of the pros and the cons. But yeah, gosh, in short, I don't know how you or Amir, but it doesn't feel like a huge surprise to me that people are taking a multi-channel approach. We celebrate that.
Mm-hmm.
No, good.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how many people took part in the poll so far. I think it was just changing over when I flicked back there. But I think, as I sort of mentioned earlier on, for me, there is a place in two camps, depending on the need and the requirement, especially on a tactical level. And it really depends what business you're in. There's a great difference between, selling Christmas trees and selling life insurance, or, selling pub meals at Mitchell's and Butler, for example. So I think, in a tactical, localized, direct response opportunity, standalone, totally valid reason for standalone for radio, flicking it on, and tests as well. I've used radio for creative and brand tests historically with great success, because I can do regional tests. I can see how messaging and CTAs index in Scotland versus the depths of Cornwall. Very useful exercise, often get it wrong. You know, cultural needs are very different across the UK. So there is that opportunity too. But yeah, I personally think there's a place for both. And I'd probably more likely lean on the multi-channel, because that's where our lovely, beautiful strategies we plan out. We look at channels working together in an integrated big hug fest. It's not always that neat. In fact, it's never, ever been that neat. You know, strategies change and pivot, and we switch things on and off. And I think part of that is the tactical piece, and part of it is the testing piece, which is, you know, radio as a standalone is perfectly valid.
I was going to say one more quick thing, if that's all right. Sorry, and then Amir, promise. Was just kind of what multi-channel means now, because I know, like, for just one quick example at KISS, we're also, in terms of the talent that we're hiring, we have an awful lot of influencers who are brilliant at connecting on the radio as well. So we've got brilliant kind of radio practitioners, but we also have people that are great on kind of other platforms, and sometimes we're able to sell in their personal social amplification into KISS wide packages. So I was just a quick point just to get that across, that like multi-channel can mean so many different things, and certainly it means a different thing at KISS and what it might mean, you know, elsewhere. But Amir, have the mic. I'll shut up.
I was just more interested. We did, I don't know if I missed it, but just demographics and stuff is one of our biggest things, is trying to reach new users, because we've got a lot of our dem is much older, and we need to replenish them with the younger people. So it's heartening to say that you can still reach younger people through radio, because it's harder and harder to reach them from anywhere else. So, you know, that's really important, I think, for us. And the creative is really important as well, because the radio has always been one of the cheapest ways to do creative stuff. So for me, like, when the world changed and everyone's about taking photographs on Instagram and these influencers, I mean, I work in food. I'm a chef by trade. And one thing that in food people always forget is all of the senses. So sound is one of the things that people always forget. So I remember Golden Wonder adverts, and they were always sold as the world's noisiest crisps. But whenever we do food, you know, to be single channel, we think if you put everything on video or, you know, TikTok or whatever, and people can't always listen to it, we forget about the importance of sound in food, like crunchiness and like, you know, all that kind of stuff. If you think about Schweppes adverts and all those things, I really want creatives. The reason I came onto this whole thing is I want people talk about creative, and they don't mean creative, they mean people who are going to do this stuff. But I really want it to mean creative. I want agencies to come to us and say, look, we can make food live on your radio, and this is how we can do it. This is so important to me.
Great stuff. I think we're just about run out of time, actually, and I'm absolutely starving. I had all this talk of crisps and fried chicken and everything else, all your basic food groups. Wonderful. I really enjoyed chatting with you guys today, and thanks so much for your time. We're now having a virtual lunch break, a networking lunch, which sounds exciting, and I hope everyone has some real food there, and we'll catch up afterwards. Thanks so much.
Thank you.